Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Conversations with Jane. We're here with, I'm Pam Myers with Pam Myers Social Media, and this is Jane C. Phillips. Jane is a medical intuitive, a psychic medium, and a paranormal investigator. And this morning, I wanted to ask you, Jane, how did you ever get into doing what you do, to your current occupation?
Well, thanks for asking, Pam. It was a long journey. Some people start out when they're born and they kind of know where they're headed. I had all this mortgage banking stuff I had to do once I graduated from college, and when I was done with that, it was a long haul. I didn't get out of that field until 2004, and realized that I wanted to do some other things. So I took a class, couple 1-year classes on learning how to be a life coach. And that was in 04 and 05 when it wasn't as big a deal. The coaching industry wasn't really there. And then partway through that, when I graduated, I thought, I need to be maybe more insightful or intuitive with my clients. So I signed up for a psychic class with Echo Bodine in Minneapolis, where I'm from. And it was a 12-week psychic development class, and we had all sorts of people. There were about 30 people in the class, and all the way from sort of really analytical skeptics, but they still wanted to learn. But most of us had had some experiences, but we weren't sure what we were experiencing. And so that segued in. After I graduated, we practiced every other week with our psychic abilities and kind of found out how each of us was getting psychic information. And that was a huge positive training ground for me, because when you're taking these classes, one of the first things that happens is you're doing group readings. So you have 30 people reading somebody, or reading, we start out with the name of somebody on a board with the last initial, and then we had to write down what we got about that person just from that. And we'd invariably, each of us would say, I didn't get anything right. And then there would be 3 of us that got what I got, and then 5 people that got something else, and somebody got something else, and we were all right. It's just that we had different perspectives on what was right, So I tell people, and it was hugely important. And then I'm really auditory, so the information I get is I hear things. My guides talk to me. They've had to teach me to be able to see things, and to be able to feel things. And but my primary thing is auditory, which means I'm a little bit of a talker when I'm working with people. But that's kind of how I started out. And somewhere along the line, we practiced for 2 years after each of us graduated. And somewhere along the line, I started taking medical intuitive classes in Minnesota. I ended up finishing up in Orlando, where I got certified in about 2008. And the reason for the medical intuitive was from coaching, some of the things I was doing coaching, I realized I was healing people with guided imagery. And I didn't really, at all these things I was pulling together and no title. So I went to medical intuitive training, which was a full year, 5-weekend course to graduate, and to be able to take all of the things I learned there, which was substantial, and turn that into a practice for me where I could incorporate the other things I learned from coaching and other things along the way. Yeah. And while I was in the classes, I sort of got the hit. I live in Santa Fe, New Mexico right now. And I got the hit that I was going to be moving to the Southwest, and eventually determined it was Santa Fe. And I'd been here once as a child when I was 14, but I didn't have a particular, oh my God, I love Santa Fe. It was just like where I was called. And so I landed here started coming in 2008 and took residency in 2009. And where I am today with my practice and the whole paranormal thing that I do started in Santa Fe. I would not have been able to accomplish that in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Too corporate. Santa Fe is pretty woo-woo. And so if people here will say, how did you decide to come to New Mexico? I said, oh, I was called down here. And in Minnesota, they would say, what do you mean by that? And here they say, yeah, me too. So there was just a lot of support to be down here. And so I've been doing the paranormal work since 2010. And I had some training around that in Minnesota, but nothing to the extent I do now. And so that was kind of how I got here. I could probably go on for hours about all the things that have happened to me since I got here, but I had some specific training to supplement insights that I already had, that I was probably psychic and was talking to people who had passed on, and that I did have psychic medium gifts, which is the ability to talk to somebody who's passed on. And so Pam wanted to ask me about how I got here today. And that's as close as we're going to get for today, because I had another agenda that ties into the psychic medium part that I offer in part. And it was prompted because this last year in 2020 has been pretty difficult. There have been people experience a lot of losses, like friends and family passing on because of COVID or other things. They've job losses, financial losses, for some, the loss of freedom because we've been cooped up. And what I wanted to talk about today was the personal losses and the people in our lives who have passed. Because this past couple of weeks, and I got guided this morning by something else, has been difficult. And so I'm going to start with, and these are all going to be good stories in the end. So if anybody's cringing when I talk about things, understand I'm telling the good story of it. But a week ago, Monday, and today is Thursday, the 28th. So a week ago, not this Monday, I got word from the wife of a friend, I know her well, that her husband had been murdered the night before. He was struggling. There were probably some drugs involved, but he was a really good person. I knew him personally, and it was sad. And it's all in the Santa Fe papers and all of this. But she wanted to make sure that he would be able to cross to the other side. And so she called me literally the Monday afternoon, and he was the incident. He died in the middle of the night earlier that day. So he showed up. And he was a little confused because he'd been under the influence when he died, but he wasn't afraid, and he wasn't angry, or all of the things that I might have expected if somebody had shot somebody. He was calm. There was a little, but more not really present yet. But by Wednesday, he was remorseful of how his life had been. But again, not angry, and not confused anymore. And on Friday, he came to me and said, I'm ready to go home. And so I was able to help cross, and I crossed people with a lot of angels and a lot of support. So they don't go to just, flip them off and say, go home. So he got a lot of support, and I was able to write his wife and another friend of his who'd gotten hold of me and say that I'd send him home. And that one of the things that I want people to know here is, as they're listening, is that he will be getting a ton of angelic healing and support on the other side, and he's being taken care of. So
it gives me goosebumps to hear you talk about.
Yeah. So that has been kind of on my radar because I was dealing with him all last week, and all of the people that I know that are really affected by his leaving. So I wanted to let people know that even if something appears really violent, it doesn't always translate into the soul feeling it as violent.
Mhm.
There was a part of him that I think was ready to leave, and so it was okay.
Okay.
So I have another thing that prompted this discussion this morning is a friend of mine who's also a client wrote me early this morning that her son had committed suicide. And I in November, and she was pretty distraught, and I'm going to try and see if I can gift her a free session to talk about it. But I've had several experiences with suicides. So if any of you have had those experiences, it's really puzzling a lot of times. And I've had all sorts of reasons. I've had a cousin of my husband, actually a nephew of my husband, committed suicide when he was 17. And he left this note that said, "Don't worry, I'm with the angels." Mm-hmm. And I didn't know at the time, I didn't have the same experiences and gifts. But what I believed later on is that he was called home. Mm-hmm. That some part of him, some part of his soul knew that he had to leave, and he was fine. And I've had other experiences where clients whose spouses have suicided and they go to heaven right away because I'm done, I'm out of here, and they're fine. It affects us really strongly. Mm-hmm. And it's difficult. I had one that was maybe feel more typical to you. The wife of my former boss when I was in Minnesota suicided. And I didn't really know her, but I must have known her in another lifetime, because when I found out, I was really, really affected by it. Mm-hmm. And she came to me several times. And so this is information for somebody to know, or a reason for suicide is she'd done the jump off the bridge thing. Oh, but wow. What she told me, and I was getting the message that she'd sort of ridden somewhere or driven somewhere. And she said, it all seems so easy and a solution to my problem. And when I talked to her husband, he said, it was her best day ever. I don't understand it. She'd had a really good day. And it was down the road. I was talking to a friend who's also psychic. And I said, why did it happen on her best day ever? And my friend said, because that's when she could do it. That's when you have the ability. On your good days, you can accomplish anything. And she was pretty distraught. She realized it was a mistake. Once again, she crossed shortly after her funeral. I helped her, and I helped calm her down psychically, and said, you're going to be able to come back and help raise your children. She left 2 young children. So there's that piece too. So no, she was getting angelic support. There are people like me that help them. And sometimes your loved ones who are suffering with depression will do things on a good day. Mm-hmm. And there's nothing, please know there's nothing that you could have done differently. Mm-hmm. You know, if you were supposed to intervene, you would have, it would have happened. Maybe not that you would have, but it would have happened. Mm-hmm. So just know that no matter what happens, they're being taken care of. My teacher, Echo Bodine, said she saw, when she visited heaven, she saw all of the angels flying in over people who had died tragically or suicided in through the hospital and giving them healing until they were well enough to go forward. So, so more upbeat. I had a friend who was 49. She was, she passed in her sleep, had a heart attack, and the whole world in Santa Fe, she was in Santa Fe, was just shocked. She was 49. She was a mortgage lender. Everybody knew her. Everyone knew Marty. And so we went to the funeral, and it was packed. There was standing room only. We were really lucky, my friend and I, that we got there early. And I had been talking to Marty throughout the week when I found out. So she was coming to me and saying, I'm fine, and all of that. And more like, oh, well, I didn't know it was going to happen this way, but so what, you know?
Okay.
So we're at the church, and she came to me and said, thank you for coming. And I told the friend I was with that she had said that. But then she was standing behind the minister when he did the eulogy. And then we're singing the last hymn, and she is flying in the north edge of the church going, whee, 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 and flying around and so free. And I was so clear to me that I had to lean over and tell my girlfriend, I said, don't let me laugh. That's just would be so inappropriate. But she is so excited to leave. You know, it's like, oh, I don't have my body anymore. So she scooted out right at the last hymn. The white light opened and I saw her leave.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, that was just kind of amazing for me to see, and gave me some understanding that most of our deaths are not like tragic.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
the last one, I know we're running a little short on time.
You're fine.
The last one I wanted to share is the friend that I live with, whose husband had Alzheimer's. His time was up in November, and he had, for about a month before his time, he was, because of the Alzheimer's, he just couldn't be present. And so he was basically out of body. So people who are ready to die, who have been sick for a while, so if you have a loved one that's been sick and is not as lucid, then they're traveling out of body. So one of the things that happened, he was coming to me and he was saying, I don't know how to do this. And that's all I was getting in my head, but I understood he didn't know how to move on, how to separate from his body. Mm-hmm. And so so a couple days later, he says, I'm starting to figure it out. And the week that he passed, on the Monday that he passed, my friend was able to go visit him. He was in a facility that she'd been prevented, but she was able to go on Tuesday. And he came to me on Monday and said, I figured it out. And he stopped eating and drinking. Oh, wow. And she got to see him on Tuesday. And on Wednesday, he said, I got it figured out entirely. I'm ready. And my friend was able to have 24 blessed, beautiful hours with him. And he left on Thursday morning. He was gone. Wow. And she got the call, and it was perfect timing. And about 3 hours after he passed, he showed up energetically in the kitchen, and he said, I'm here, I did it. He was so excited. Wow. That he'd figured out, and he says, I'm so free, and I'm looking down at that body, and I don't feel like I did in that body at all.
That's interesting, because I wanted to ask you, it almost seems like, from what you're saying, it sounds like the soul goes through some kind of a transition of accepting, crossing over, accepting, leaving their body and going somewhere else.
Right. And there's because you have the human part of us, the physical body that we've got, and the physical brain that we've got, this soul has to figure out how to dump it. Basically, how to separate the soul energy from the physical energy that we have. Mm. And I hadn't really understood that there was a learning process with that, possibly. Not always. If it's sudden, like some of my earlier ones that I mentioned, the separation's probably quick. But when you have to do it yourself in some ways, that was interesting for me. And the husband stuck around. He talked to me. I got messages, and because I was living with my friend, I was able to give her the messages, and we wrote down what we could. But he was so proud of himself that he'd figured out how to be lucid again and how to get his himself back. So if anyone listening has a loved one or somebody that they're really in grief about, and they can't let go, and they really don't know what's happening, one of the things I do is I do support people around that. And if you're so attached to your loved one that you can't let them go, then you're also depriving them of the opportunity to go get the healing that they deserve.
Mm-hmm.
So, and sometimes you just need somebody like me who can help you with that and help you understand how they're doing. I don't claim to always hear from them, but many times if somebody is connecting to me in a call, their loved one will show up. And I might get a clear message or just something calm.
Mm-hmm.
But for the most part, these passings, even if they look tragic or difficult, are everybody's being supported.
Mm-hmm. And you don't need to be in the same town area as anyone else.
No.
You can, yeah.
No,
Mm-hmm.
because what people don't understand about psychic and paranormal and all those is just energy, and energy is outside of time and place.
Right.
So, and plus, it's just not me doing the work. I give credit to many other energies that help me. I have a whole team of people. So when I'm talking to somebody, they're going and gathering data and feeding it to me. And because I'm so verbal, I'll get a verbal message, or sometimes I'll get a buzz if your loved one is showing up.
Mm-hmm.
But just understand that even how tough this last year has been with all your losses, your loved ones, unless you really haven't been able to let them go, have moved on, they're getting healing. They'll be able to come back and support you in spirit form, not like ghost type form where they don't have the same wisdom. And so if you want their support and you can't let them go, if you can let them go for healing, they will come back. If you need them, they're going to come back and help. My friend who was murdered will come back and help raise his children. And the wife way back in the 90s who committed suicide will be back raising her children. She's helping. She will show up as a guardian angel or some way for her children. So I want people to have hope, and that this year is going to be different and better, but it won't be free of challenges. So thanks for listening to a longer blog today. And I wish all of you well in the coming week. I'll be back next week at 10:30 Mountain and 12 p.m. Eastern. And we post it on social media.
Yes,
and you can find me.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. You can find me at janecphillips.com, which will lead you into all that I do. Thank you.
As well as Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. Jane is on all social media platforms, so she's easy to find. All right. Thanks so much, Jane. Enjoyed talking to you this week.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks.